Sorry to keep you all waiting. Got Karen in yet. Yeah, Karen's coming in. Oh. Hey, Mike, we see you there. We're getting a little late on our starting time, but we're about to come up and, okay, thank you. That's Mike Prater with lap coach going to join us. Go over those slides.
Hey, Mike, can you say something?
Yeah, he's coming on.
Oh, he's on, the video's on, but I weirdly kind of stopped.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. And we're just giving Karen another minute. Wendy just texted her the proper link to the meeting. I don't see her up yet, so I'm gonna give her a minute, but 5 minutes past. While we're continuing to better out our technical difficulties, we do have a quorum here. We could get that first resolution. Maybe we could open our meeting and get that first get that first order of business out of the way, and by then we should be able to have.
So did she get on?
I haven't seen her come on yet, but what I was suggesting is we can open our meeting and then we can get that first order of business off, the adoption of the resolution. And then I saw you text that information to her, so hopefully she'll come on.
Okay, so we
So what do you think about that?
call the meeting to order at 5:38
Thank you.
for the special meeting.
We'll do a roll call vote. Director Redford,
Here.
Director Van Pelt,
Here.
Director DeAmbra,
Here.
Director Beard,
Here.
and Director Jones.
I'm not seeing her yet. Is there something I'm doing wrong here? Sometimes I see her like in a waiting room or something like that, but I don't see anything like that. Oh, there she is. There she is. You're muted still, Karen, but we can see you.
There we go.
And then do the next one.
Okay, great. And we just got ourselves started and you just made roll call. And so we're ready to go. Flag
Perfect.
salute.
Will you lead us?
I'll do my best. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay.
Now we lost your video, Karen.
Yeah, I'm just looking, we need to do the adoption of resolution for the remote teleconference. So if you could go ahead and do the staff report on that.
Okay, thank you. Right, this is every 30 days we have to update this remote teleconference. The reason staff added that to the special agenda this time was that while we adopted it at our last regular meeting, it would have expired because our next regular meeting came more than 30 days since our last. So it's here before you again today. That was it. We're asked to look at this each month and consider whether the remote teleconferencing of meetings is still something that the district wants to continue on.
Can we not jump for 6 months? I think we could probably agree that for 6 months, it's a good idea.
You
There,
have to do it every, you
by law, you have, by the
You
way
have
the
to
law
do-
was written, it has to be voted on every 30 days.
have to do it every 30 days.
Yeah, in
With
fact,
that-
and district council's not here today, and I didn't expect him to be zooming in, so we don't want to get out in front of him. But when I tried to put this on the consent calendar on my first agenda with your board, and Mr. Battle said, no, actually, you're supposed to specifically consider this every 30 days. We took it off the consent. So I think the answer to, can we say, hey, we're good, we'll keep it for 6 months? No, we can't do that. But maybe when we do get together in our next regular meeting, Mr. Battles can speak to us as far as when we may be able to drop the teleconferencing meetings, if that's something your district wants to do, or we can talk
I think
about
it's a great thing.
I think just the opposite.
Yeah,
We have a lot of logistical problems.
We're getting better.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, if there's something about eyeball to eyeball contact, bantering back and forth.
You can still teleconference, there's just other requirements you have to meet. You have to post it outside wherever you're at. And it has to be on the agenda that where you'll be. And if you're at home, the public is allowed to come in just like a regular meeting. They're allowed to come here. Am I correct? Yeah. So, well, like if you were in Germany, they would be allowed to go to Germany.
That'd be great.
Go to-
I could use some help.
or Texas or whatever, but you have to post it outside. So you can still do, as long as you have a quorum here, you can still do teleconferencing without this.
It would return to the pre-COVID standard,
Right.
but I don't know that, and I'm not the lawyer. Are there any comments from the public before we call for a motion on this? I don't see any. So is there a
We do
motion?
have one. Jay Freeman's got his hand up.
Oh, Jay, please.
I'll say you don't have to use this provision when you activate it. It just gives you flexibility such that if somebody, one of you ends up in a position where it's really difficult to come to the meeting, rather than you just not being able to participate, you can
Right.
call. So
Right.
I would think you should do it.
I see no reason
If
why.
I
we
think
wouldn't.
I have COVID, at least I won't be coming here to share it with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. And any
So
other
if I need a
public
motion then?
comments?
I'll give a motion then to approve.
Very good. Is there a second?
I'll second to approve it.
Okay, Wendy?
Okay, so we have a motion by Director Van Pelt and a second by Director Beard to adopt resolution 22-07. Authorizing continuation of remote teleconference meetings. We'll do a roll call vote. Director Redfern,
I,
Director Van Pelt,
Aye.
Director Beard,
Aye.
Director Gambra,
No lone wolf over here.
Director Jones.
Aye.
I'm giving you 6 eyes that'll cover the next 6 months.
Okay, and then with that, we can move on to the reason for this meeting, which is to get the presentation from the executive officer of Santa Barbara LAFCO regarding the MSR process. And is it pronounced Mr. Prater?
Correct. Very good.
Okay, well, I turn it over to you and or our general manager, Mike LeBrun, to take it from here.
We'll go with you, Mike.
Go ahead. Okay, I would say you want to give an intro. You're good. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me and thank you for allowing it to be teleconferenced. It does help me out since I am remote and although I could travel if need be. And thank you for taking the opportunity to listen to LAFCO and hear a little bit more about us and what we're doing. We're always happy to share with anybody that wants to learn more. So with that, I'll get into our adopted work plan and the effort that LAFCO is undertaking. So let me go ahead and get a PowerPoint up. and share my screen. Oh, is there an opportunity to share?
Yeah, we
Oh,
need to allow
I'm
them to
sorry. I've got to give you a share.
You got to give me a share there. Yeah.
I think so.
Try it.
Wait, I don't want to do that.
We have our secret weapon, Jay.
I know where it is. It's under participants
And you have to make him the.
more and allow. I just did this. Wait, make host, rename.
Allow.
I think it's actually under the screen sharing button. I only
Oh,
say that
okay.
because I had to get through this with somebody more technical than me just last week.
Under the screen share button. Screens. Well, but these are my screens,
I think
basically.
there's like an arrow next to it that allows you to before you exit out of there. And click the little up arrow next to it. Now click exit out of there.
Okay. All right. Who said
And
technical?
then click the little up arrow next to the screen share. It's under there.
Advanced multiple.
Wouldn't it be under participants?
I would have thought
and
it
Make
would
him
be.
the host.
You can make them the host, but
Click on
that's.
participants.
He already has that. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And then
And this is where I just did it this morning. It was
make
loud.
host.
No, but okay. I'm gonna make you the host, Mike. You'll
And
be
then
hosting.
he'll have to make us the host when the
Make
meeting's
him
over.
co-host. I'm gonna go co-host,
Oh,
Mike.
co-host me. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm making you co-host. That way when you leave abruptly, you don't
No,
knock us
he-
off. How's that?
That's been making some.
Teamwork.
How's
There
that?
he goes. Now we got it.
There you
Okay.
go.
Everybody able to see the shared screen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So what we'll cover tonight is the service review, certainly that we're looking at, and all the different agencies that are involved in this particular review, largely on water, wastewater, and stormwater. We'll also look at the intent and purpose of what a sphere of influence is, at least what it means to LAFCO, and how we use that. And we'll look at the information that LAFCO uses to help determine where to draw that boundary line. Look at what the official definition is, just so that everybody's clear on what that is. We'll look at the service review component itself. We'll go over the proposed outline that was adopted by the commission. And then we're going to dive in a little deeper into chapter 3, which is the agency profile, which will specifically cover the San Ynez CSD as your own unique individual chapter. And then we'll talk about the next steps of where LAFCO takes this, and then we'll open it up for any questions and answer period. So if I back up just a little bit, LAFCO embarked on a municipal service review program for a multi-year program. We initially kicked off this program last year where we looked at fire, police, emergency service, public safety sector stuff. And we looked at that and adopted that sphere of influence and followed a very similar outline. And so that has been approved and adopted, and we changed a couple of boundaries within some of those agencies that we reviewed. Now this year, we're embarking on water, wastewater, stormwater services. You can see the list of agencies involved, and I'll have a little more zoomed in slide so you can catch all of those. But essentially 33 agencies that we're looking at for this particular review. On the heels of this review, we'll then dive into transportation related services, lighting, transit, airport agencies that provide those types of services. And then for the 2 subsequent years after that, we'll look at parks, open space, and libraries, and then all other services that we haven't looked at that need to be evaluated. And those typically include cemetery, the hospitals, mosquito vector control, any of those agencies that have outlying services that they provide that didn't get picked up in one of these previous service reviews. So to specifically look at what we're undertaking this particular cycle is water, wastewater, recycled water, and stormwater. Here's the list of the 33 agencies that are involved, and you can see it runs the gamut. We have community service districts that are all in there. We have county service areas or county dependent districts like Laguna County Sanitation. We have the 8 cities that will be involved. And then we have specific water districts that get involved. Those that provide water as retail water providers like Goleta and Montecito. Others that are just were recently formed for the purposes of SYGMA to manage groundwater basins. And then we have sanitation districts that are also involved. So it runs the gamut. It's quite broad. And we'll be looking at all of the services that all of these agencies provide in this round. Now, just to go a little bit and talk about what the sphere is and what a service review does, the sphere of influence really establishes what we're calling a 20-year kind of growth boundary. So it's an area that tries to identify where annexations might occur within that next 20 years. You look at it as sort of this big picture view of where growth might occur for a jurisdiction of particular note. Now, our commission also looks at this kind of as the engagement period that predates maybe the annexation that might be thought of that's forthcoming. And how do we draw this boundary and what goes into why this boundary is drawn? Well, that is the work product of what's termed the municipal service review. And what that really is this information document that's very information driven that talks about all these different factors. And there's at least 7 factors that must be discussed that's required out of state law. And this information is largely driven through that questionnaire survey that was sent to your agency for answers. So you're going to help us kind of document this information in this service review. We're going to use this service review as one of the components to help us determine where the commission wants to draw the sphere of influence boundary for all these agencies. So what's the purpose of that sphere of influence boundary? Well, it's to promote orderly and logical growth. For one, it encourages the provision of efficient services, and it's to discourage urban sprawl and preserve ag lands. The SOI really helps to organize these different services and developments that might be occurring or being identified in particular areas that can reasonably be served by a particular jurisdiction. The official definition of a sphere of influence comes out of the Cortes-Zenat-Hertzberg Act, and it means a plan for a probable physical boundary and service area of a local agency as determined by the commission. And so there's a lot of words, but doesn't have a whole lot of meaning behind that. So essentially what that is, the commission will take in a lot of information through its analysis, working with your agencies, working with all the agencies to help determine where the boundary should be drawn, because the boundary of a sphere of influence is a precursor requirement before annexation can occur as a requirement of the law. And so that's what makes the sphere of influence kind of an important piece is if an area wants to be annexed into a particular agency, it must first be within their sphere of influence. And I will note, just so that the Santa Ynez CSD understands, although LAFCO is looking at a municipal service review for water and wastewater services, and we're going to define and explain the data and information in this document and in this report. Santa Ynez also provides other services, as you noted, transportation and lighting. Well, those study areas and that information won't be evaluated till after this particular document is approved. And so once we have all of the information explained in a report and given information and documentation around it, Once all that is prepared and adopted, then a sphere of influence will be adopted for those agencies. So on the heels of this particular review, San Diego SYCSD will not have a sphere of influence that's been adjusted yet, because we still need to evaluate the transportation and lighting components and powers that you have. And so you'll likely have your sphere amended post that decision and discussion on those services. So just make that clear, that we're not going to draw a boundary line for your agency on the heels of this documentation. So what goes into that municipal service review? Well, as we indicated, it's an informational gathering and evaluation document. And so your jurisdiction provides us that information as we requested in the questionnaire. It helps us document this information and write about this. We do all of the analysis on the LAFCO staff side based on the information that was gathered, based on information on documents or reports that your agency produces and prepares that helps guide your decision and policymaking operations. And so we look at all that information and we analyze all that information. We will prepare a report. We will let your agency look at that report as an administrative review to make sure that we've documented it accurately and have the right information in as accurate as possible before we go ahead and pursue actual hearings on this. And so after your agency's had a chance to look at an administrative draft, we'll produce what's called a public review draft and comment period, and we'll gather more information from the public and from your agency if you wanted to request additional questions or comments or clarifications, even post your initial review. So there's ample time to review this document, provide comments about this document. And the staff at LAFCO will prepare any responses and changes to the document as necessary. And then we'll hold hearings on adoption of this sphere of influence and municipal service review document itself. Through this review, LAFCO will look at and analyze what we term as study areas. And these are areas in which need further detailed information about whether or not they need service of any kind, or if there is service available and capable from an agency within a reasonable area that can provide service to them, whether it be water or wastewater or whatever the service may be that the study is evaluating. And so we'll look at study areas and we'll do an analysis of those. And we're asking as part of this, do you have any areas that your agency has been requested upon by particular landowners or developers or groups of people that you're aware of? Or internally, have you spoken or as a body about areas to serve that are kind of outside of your current boundary? So those are questions that have been asked through this questionnaire and survey. We'll look at those if there are any, and we'll do some further analysis and refinement of those and make a recommendation about whether or not we think the area should be included or not when it comes time to adopt a sphere for your agency. So the sphere is territory that's either within the city or the district that is expected to serve as well in the future. So we don't want to just look at areas that might need services but aren't really going to be served by any particular agency per se. We want to make sure that there's reasonableness to provide that service and that the service is capable by the agency before we draw the boundary for that agency to include a particular area. The sphere of influence does not give any jurisdiction any more legal authority or regulatory control over an area. So it's not like you can draw this boundary and say, now we have the rights to determine what happens or what goes on. There's no legal authority, regulatory control as the SOI determines. The SOI does not prevent development from occurring within the county. So all land use controls with the county remain intact. All landowners still retain all their property rights that are granted to them as landowners. None of that changes whether you're in the sphere or not in the sphere. Really, it's a precursor as to whether or not does this area need service, and does the agency have the capability to provide that service? And are they looking at and documenting ways to provide adequate services beyond their boundaries? And if so, then the boundary should likely be amended to include, and at some future point, the agency or the landowners could request annexation into the district for services. So further, the existing uses and future development plans are all pieces of information that are used to help determine the sphere of influence. As we indicated, the municipal service review in itself is a piece of document that helps identify and tell LAFCO where a logical place is to draw that boundary. Many pieces within that service review plan have a number of these informational components to it. We look at the size of particular development, the parcels, or if they're in need of service. We look at topographic and physical constraints and conditions. We look at the jurisdiction's willingness to provide the service. We look at the jurisdiction's ability to provide that service. We look at all the planning principles that are in play. We look at any legal agreements that may have existed or exist to provide services, typically maybe outside of your agency. We look at any general plans that might be in play and what they speak about, whether development and services are needed in a particular area. All of this information is used to help guide and determine and is presented to the commission as a body, and they use that to make their decision on where the sphere of influence boundary needs to be. So to dive a little bit more into the actual service review that we have proposed for this year of water, wastewater, as indicated, we're looking at 33 agencies. We'll look at their operations. We'll look at financial performance. We'll look at governance structures. We'll look at the ability to provide the service and the importance of the agency in a particular area. And then we're also going to look at the determinations that are required by state law when developing a service review. The adopted outline or the report looks at an overview of and identifies key findings that the report has evaluated. It looks at the service review determinations that are required by law. That'll be in chapter 1. Then we'll look at the sphere of influence determinations that are required when we adopt a sphere of influence. As indicated, these will likely be for the agencies that provide only these types of services. And so they will not be in a subsequent review because they will have been evaluated completely with this particular review. And then chapter 3 is an agency profile that we talked about that will specifically look at each of the 33 agencies as a standalone and document all of the components that are in there. And then we'll have an appendix that has a relationship of how this service review relates to the prior service review that was prepared for public safety and any future service reviews that are prepared for those other areas that we talked about at the beginning of this presentation. So diving a little deeper into what that chapter 3 agency profile will look like. Here's kind of the nuts and bolts of what we're going to look at. We're looking at operations of what Santa Ynez CSD does. We're looking at any opportunities and challenges that you see or have been presented by or documented through other reports and master planning that you have done. We're going to look at your sphere boundary, where it currently exists, where it might look like and where it could look like it in the future. We'll be looking at those study areas within that sphere boundary section. And then we're going to look at the services and the attributes that are provided. And so we'll look at water and wastewater, and we're going to get into the details of how many miles of pipeline, how many lift stations, where does the effluent go, what's the capacity of that plant, all of the details, components of what typically is documented in a lot of the master planning that you guys already do. And then we'll look at finance and governance, what's your revenues, what's your expenditures, what's your reserves, how much do you spend on this particular service versus other services, things of that nature. And so those are the many of the things that we've asked for throughout that questionnaire that we're asking you to answer. And then lastly, we'll have a community survey of a short 8 questions that LAFCO has put on our website. We've encouraged the members of the public to go there, pull up the Survey Monkey and provide us with a quick synopsis of what's their level of satisfaction with the service that your agency provides. And the agency staff is welcome to provide answers to that survey as well as any of the board members. So it's open to everybody to answer that questionnaire. And we'll give a response of who answered it and how they kind of answered it in kind of a general generic form. We won't identify anybody specific. It's an anonymous survey. So I talked about these determinations and what they are. So there are 5 determinations that are required out of a municipal service review. And really they looked at the planned land uses in a particular area. They look at the probable need for that service, and they look at the adequacy to provide the service and the capability and the capacities of the components to provide that service. And then we're asked to look at social and economic communities of interest and disadvantaged communities. So we'll make determinations for those. So as part of the next steps, we sent out that questionnaire to all of the agencies. The response deadline was March 31st, that's tomorrow, but we're obviously giving more time. We want to make sure everybody has adequate time to prepare a thorough response. If need be, run by their boards if they wanted their boards to look at it. We really want to work in a cooperative fashion here. We want to make sure we have accurate information that gives a reasonable time to respond to that. And as I have been telling many of the agencies, there are 33 agencies, that it's a lot of information to consume. There's an employee of 1 at LAFCO to evaluate all of this. I certainly cannot get to it all come April 1st. So there's still plenty of time to give a good effort and submit that to LAFCO as soon as you can. I've already promoted the survey that's on the LAFCO website. And the administrative draft that we're hoping to target is likely late September of this year for your agency to take another review at that. And then early next year, January, February, we're hoping to produce a public review draft for comments with an adoption likely in April. So what is LAFCO and what's our purpose? As we've indicated, it's to really encourage orderly boundaries and to discourage urban sprawl and preserve ag and open space and look at efficient public services. And so how do we do that? We look at and develop these municipal service reviews. We draw spheres of influence, boundary lines. And through that, we look at regional housing needs. We look at adequacy of water and wastewater services, prime services that are required to provide future development for areas in a particular area. These are all key issues that we look at that drives our decision making. And the decision makers that make up the commission are the ones that decide where the sphere boundary is and adopt the service review plan itself. They're made up of 2 county supervisor members, 2 city council members, 2 special district members, and 1 public member. And then each of those categories have an alternate member that can sit in and vote if there is a need to step down from another member or a member is absent from a particular meeting. That particular composition of commissioners take many actions. Many of them most commonly are aware of are annexations or actions that LAFCO as a body makes. We often look at out-of-agency service agreements as well. Those are the ability to provide services that are not within your jurisdiction for a particular reason, for a particular need, but they still remain outside of your jurisdiction. As we talked about, we're required to look at spheres of influence every 5 years, and to evaluate those spheres, look at municipal service reviews. And so that's why we're looking at this particular service review currently. And there's other opportunities and actions. We look at consolidations, we look at activation of any latent powers, maybe a service that your agency thought you might want to provide, but is not a power that you're authorized to provide, like maybe recreation, a park or something of that nature. You would come to LAFCO and get that authorized to provide. So those are actions that LAFCO typically takes from our commission. As you may be aware, there are a number of special districts within the county. And so there are 53 special districts, 45 are independent and have their own governing bodies. 8 are county service areas that are governed by the Board of Supervisors. And there are 9 community service districts. Most of them provide water and sewer as part of their powers. LAFCO adopts an independent budget. So the commission looks at that. We are taking our fiscal year 22-23 budget at our February 7th meeting. We will likely adopt a final budget at our May meeting. We're required to adopt a final budget by June 15th. And so a tentative recommended budget for the fiscal year 22-23 is at $616,700. That is broken down into a 1/3 share between the county, the city, and the special districts. And so those 1/3 agency shares breaks down to about $192,000. So to summarize, the sphere of influence, it has many components and information as its source before we draw where that sphere of influence boundary should be. It does have a limited legal application, as we discussed, in terms of its authority. The sphere of influence and the municipal service review update, it really is guided as a facilitation of discussion about services, about the capabilities, about areas in need of services. And LAFCO uses this really to set the table for future growth and development. Again, an administrative draft likely in September, a public review draft in January, February of next year, with an adoption in April. With that, if there are any questions of the board or anybody at the public, I'd be happy to answer any.
I'm waiting. Yes, I think maybe there are some questions of the folks there at the meeting, if anyone would like to kick it off. Well,
I have a question, Mr. Prater. Can you hear me? This
Yeah.
is Director Van Pelt. Thanks a lot for the presentation. It's a good rundown. There's a lot of information for me to digest, but I think my concern is, can you give us a brief overview of how LAFCO looks at activating latent powers of community service districts like ours?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the activated latent power typically comes with a document called a plan for service. And a plan for service really documents how are you going to provide that service and how are you going to fund that service. So if you wanted to activate, let's say Parks and Recreation, and there was a park that you wanted to go in your district boundary, and you were going to provide that service for maintenance, we would look at how you're going to fund that operation and what is the extent of the maintenance that you're going to provide, or how many parks do you plan on having throughout your district boundary, and how do you propose to fund those. And that plan for service will document those, and LAFCO will use that as the basis for the analysis of whether or not it's an adequate and just plan to do that activated service.
Okay, I see. And if there was certain questions, and I don't really know where I'm going with this, it's just more to understand the process is, would we turn to LAFCO if there are questions, just like how to fund? I mean, we're a pretty small community service district. If you use parks as an example, we have a local park and say we wanted to look after it, but we don't understand how to fund it. Would we turn to LAFCO on the different funding capabilities, or would we have to come up with a proposal and present it to LAFCO with no prior feedback or guidance?
Well, LAFCO will certainly be here to help and assist, and we can reach out to our partnering agencies within the county that may provide that particular service and look at ways in which they provide the service and put you in contact with them. LAFCO is also a partner within the broader California legislature of LAFCOs. So we have counter LAFCOs in every county. So there's additional resources that we can help assist your agency in identifying adequate funding sources or mechanisms in which to provide service of other agencies that provide that service throughout the state and how they do it. So we can put you in contact with those so that you can ultimately decide on what is your preferred approach. But ultimately, you would have to pick the approach and process that you as an agency would want to perform and the service, and present that to LAFCO for LAFCO to make a decision. So we wouldn't basically present it a multitude of options. You'd pick one and you would say, this is how we want to do it.
Okay. And using this park example in recreations, county of, again, this is just hypothetical. I'm not going anywhere with it. I have no intention, but County of Santa Barbara, it provides the services to our local park. Say that our community service district is interested in activating that latent power, but the service is already there. Is that an issue from LAFCO's standpoint? If a service is already being provided and now we're trying to say encroach on another, the county in this regard, the county's servicing of the park?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's an obstacle per se. What I would say is it's actually good information, because then we can lean on the current service provider as to what it costs for them to provide that service. And if transferring that service to your district is an avenue that's available, then how does that work? And I think we can use that in partnership to determine the best suitability to provide the type of service that you would be looking at. And so the county may provide that type of service currently, but the district may want to increase the level of service and provide a higher grade level of service than what is currently being provided. In order to do that, we would then look at, well, what are the services that the county provides and how better suited is the district into providing that service? And so I look at it as an opportunity rather than, to provide more information and understanding of what's happening out there and how can it get better.
Thank you. That's a good rundown. That's all for me.
I would like to comment on that, Mr. Prater. That is very helpful to me. And I think as our valley is changing, our little community is changing, I hear from a lot of people that they would like to have more say in, the recreation or where the sidewalks or lights are. And it's nice to have you frame it in a positive way, because it is about providing the best possible service to the people who live in an area. So that was very helpful. Thank you. Are there any other questions?
If Mike stops screen sharing, we'll be able to see him and hear him.
All right, Mike, maybe you can stop screen sharing and that way we'll bring you and Karen back up in better.
Thank you. I had a question about sphere of influence also. Does this change the MSR? Is it going to result in changes to our sphere of influence?
So as I tried to indicate, this particular municipal service review will not result in a change to the San Ynez SYCSD sphere of influence, largely because we still have to evaluate your transportation and lighting service. So once we evaluate that, which that service review will be the next service review following this particular one. So we'll be sending out another survey on the heels of this approval, probably next year, asking to answer another survey related to transportation and lighting. And when we adopt that particular sphere of influence, we'll take the information from both of these documents to help define where your sphere of influence should be. So your boundary will not change, but certainly the information within this particular sphere of influence for water and wastewater will help shape the conversation about where your sphere will likely need to be or go in the future.
We had a lot of change in the last decade, and one was, I believe we added or attempted to add previously in this district, Los Olivos, and then they created their own district. So they are no longer in our sphere of influence, I would think, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So that was a proposal where the district anticipated that they could take on Los Olivos, or the Los Olivos community can develop their own community services district. And ultimately that's what happened. But certainly we can look at other areas in and around the valley that might be in need of services. And the commission and I have already spoken about a number of those. And I'm sure your district is aware of the Ballard community and Janny Way and all of those areas that are on septic systems that will likely at some point be a desire to move them off onto some community system. And so those are areas that will likely be studied as part of this evaluation to determine, is there an area that is suitable for them to move to? And does it make sense to amend a boundary, whether it be San Ynez's boundary or some other boundary, or create some other district in the area so that they can get services that are enhanced for their community?
I think of Janin Acres, it comes up a lot.
Yeah.
And they were in our sphere of influence and they moved to the city of Solvang, I believe. And anyway, certain areas, it can be controversial. And I think the best thing we can do is make sure that the people who live in those areas stay informed of what's going on and have an opportunity to express how they feel about it.
Exactly.
One more question. If you don't mind me asking another question, Mr. Prater, is I see right below the activate latent powers, consolidations, mergers, and reorganization. Is, when you're, again, a lot of these are hypothetical for me just to, wrap my head around it. When you look at consolidations or mergers of agencies, is that something that LAFCO recommends before the agencies present this to LAFCO? Is it something that LAFCO, once they do their due diligence, would recommend the agencies merge or consolidate? Or is it the opposite, that the agencies themselves present LAFCO with their plan? How does that tend to happen?
To play out. Yeah, so good question. It really is both formats. So through these service reviews, LAFCO can often make an analysis of where the service might be better fit or suited. And so we can make a recommendation that an agency look at the opportunity to maybe consolidate with another agency that would provide heightened service opportunities. But what I will say is most likely it comes from the agency themselves. And typically the way I like to work is I like to see cooperation amongst agencies that vet this information before it really comes to light and to LAFCO in itself. And so there will be most likely the scenario we're working with the communities down in Montecito, where Montecito Water and Sanitation District have been talking about consolidation for a number of years. And they are now embarking on a study to evaluate the feasibility of that. And so we are letting those communities drive the analysis and conversation and talk about whether that is something suitable for them to do before they present it as an action for LAFCO to take. And that is the preferred method in my mind, because then that makes sure that those communities are on board, that those agencies are on board with that process. Because ultimately, any of those actions that are taken by LAFCO, there's a process called a protest process, in which the community can vote as to whether they like the decision that was made. And if they vote down that decision, then that action does not move forward. And so it does nobody any good to quickly move through a process without much information or knowledge and make a decision and then present a protest proceeding before the members of the community to say, do you like this decision we just made? You hadn't heard anything about it. You don't know anything about it, but we made this decision. So that doesn't, I just don't like that process. I prefer to be much more collaborative in our effort and let the communities drive that decision after they've vetted that with their constituents.
Understood. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions? I think this has been very helpful and I appreciate you coming in, Mr. Prater, but David or Bob or Frank, anything?
No, I think that was one of my questions that Director Van Pelt had, but it basically got answered.
I appreciate your questions, Director Van Pelt, and hearing the answers, I was thinking, you have a resource in the room. Jay Freeman is from the Isla Vista CSD. He's a director there and serves on LAFCO. And he's been very helpful in a number of ways to our agency. But if you and Jay talk a little bit, he may be able to give you additional information.
Yeah. Good point.
Okay, well, then
Very good.
Mike.
Well, thank you for the invite. And my door is always open. So if you need any other questions or would like to talk about anything else individually or as a group, just let me know.
Thank you. That's good to know. It's really nice meeting you.
Does he have a number?
I can get you his information.
Oh, yeah.
Right, yeah.
And the website is there also. This contact is in the information he provided. So very good.
Great. Thank you. You guys have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike or Wendy, do you have anything?
We do. We actually have, and I think Wendy passed it out here already, and we sent it to you here by email. What we have is the actual questionnaire, and then as opposed to trying to retype all his questions, we just started an answers document, and you have that in front of you. And sort of going through this all with, you can take this, the ones that I think that, the staff has not been able and has not tried to answer are under section B, boundaries.
I see that.
And these are the ones specifically, I'll read question 1 under boundaries. Does your agency desire to change its existing jurisdictional boundary? If yes, please indicate the areas and reasons. Question 2, does your agency desire to change its existing sphere of influence boundary? Question 3, does your agency plan to plan to or currently provide services outside its existing boundary. Now, this is one we know we do provide in regards to our contract operations with the Chumash. That's outside our existing boundary. So there, we know we've got a set answer of what is existing, but as to whether we're looking at anything more or not, we'd be looking to your board for policy direction. And then overlaps and duplicative services by other agencies within our boundaries. We couldn't come up with any, but I think this is a good, something to discuss here with your board if you have questions on that. And then, then lastly, that question 5 under boundaries, consolidations or reorganizations with others been considered in the past 5 years. Would this evaluation benefit your agency? We didn't know of any, but really that second part is that, will that benefit our agency? So those 5 questions, we don't have answers to on our answer sheet here. And then at the very end, there's a section called other information. And I think we went through most of that as staff did and was able to answer it or say it wasn't applicable with few exceptions. And those exceptions include 8 and 16. Those two, we felt like they had policy implications to them. Number 8 under other reads, is your agency preparing for future services, needs, or demands? What strategies are used to direct growth / service demands where infrastructure is or will be available? That's question 8 under other. And last, number 16 under other. Number 16, yeah. Are there any specific topics you'd like LAFCO to analyze as part of the upcoming service review?
Well, because the tribe is a sovereign, they're not part of the municipal service review. I probably should have asked that when Mr. Prater was here. But Wendy may have a better memory of this, but I believe that the tribe sent a letter to us and LAFCO in 2016 requesting annexation on the other side of Meadowvale, where they were going to do, I think 1.5 or 2.5 million commercial square feet. And then there's a lot of development going on there, and I don't know how much of that is going to be part of our municipal service review. Even though they're a contract agency, it gets a little complicated. So maybe that would be something that we would want to work with the tribe and talk about.
That's, it's a good question. I don't know if Wendy recalls that actual application to us, but we struggled in that as well in answering these questions. My understanding, and maybe Mr. Freeman knows better, but the tribe is not subject to LAFCO. It's not part of the municipal services review. But go ahead.
That's not tribal land.
I do believe it is now.
It is now.
Yes.
Okay, at one point it
then.
wasn't. It wasn't then, but.
It wasn't
okay.
then. It never went anywhere, but now it is in tribal land,
The Meadowvale property out there.
Okay.
as far as I know.
And we looked at, there's some other properties that are clearly within our services boundary that are now tribal owned.
Yes, like
Right.
the cultural center and the old gas station. And I do believe in this little yellow house right here. That's all.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And we should also even though it's part of Solvang's sphere of influence.
Yeah.
Jan and Acres, they have no pipe. We have a pipe going right by there.
Correct.
So it would actually make logistical sense for that to be in our sphere of influence. Not that we want to push it at this point, but it really logistically should be in our sphere of influence because our pipe goes by there. They're not going to bring a pipe all the way over from Solvang to service them when it's need be. Our pipe is there.
And I don't know if you guys remember, but in 2019 or 20, we did an out of agency agreement with 2 properties
Right.
in Janet Acres to supply them sewer because their septic tanks failed and they're right above our line. But that didn't go through because of the water district and the Caltrans requirements for the speed limit. That was like way above what the property owners could do with the setbacks and the, all the requirements of the county. Because once you go over 45 miles an hour in the speed limit zone with the county, the requirements just like skyrocket.
What kind of requirements?
I don't remember what they
Okay.
are. We'd have to look at the Caltrans. Well, I should say not the county, the Caltrans. We'd have to look at the permit because it's like on the backside. But
Something else occurred with that, Wendy, that it wasn't handled very well by the homeowners. We were going to contract Caltrans, and one of the homeowners the morning after the meeting called Caltrans and said, yeah, they approved it. You got to do this. And Caltrans had not even been contacted yet. And so
Right.
I think we could work with them, a fresh approach, and come up with a plan how to do it instead of being told we can't do it.
yeah, the contractor jumped the gun and went straight to Caltrans and said, oh yes, by the way, we have a permit and we're going to do this, this, and this. And they're like, whoa, wait a minute. We don't know anything about that. So,
Right. We tell you, you don't tell us.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but
right.
Janet
We were-
Acres is a bit of a sticky one. I went to a meeting with Supervisor Hartman, Alan Jones, who lives there. I can't think of the very nice lady's name, and our former GM. And the residents feel very strongly about not wanting to be moved into our sphere of influence. So we would have to do a lot of public outreach and talk and come up with a plan on how we could serve them.
and we actually had a plan with the city of Solvang to start public outreach to see what the response would be. But then the city council got way in hot water and was overturned, and then it just kind of died. And then they got rid of all the employees. So
Right.
that were handling in the planning department that were handling the,
I'm wondering if Janet Acres is a special problems area,
correct.
and with that kind of extra scrutiny, would Janet Acres foreseeably be forced into some kind of sewer type arrangement? I mean, because I know, because I was purchasing, well, I recently went through, a Ballard, and the Ballard was in the special problems area as well, and so I got in the weeds a little bit. So I'm just kind of wondering, going back to some of my early training here, is special problems area has a unique focus, right?
Correct.
And because of the concentration. So I'm wondering, is that something that LAFCO gets involved in, or someone, other agency, basically saying, look, I know you want to stay on septic, but the reality is we're going to force you right into, so it doesn't become us trying to annex them into our spheres of influence.
The State Regional Water Quality Control Board out of San Luis Obispo has the ultimate power to order septics to
They
to
do,
sewer.
that's the ultimate
if
state
they have-
authority.
if they can show cause because of degradation of the soil.
Right.
And that takes time to monitor, to do it. It takes years, unless some kind of catastrophic thing happens. So they're the ones that are the only ones who have the power.
Yeah, no, and that's great. I'm not saying that we take that. I'm just wondering if there's outside pressure to where it's not us being aggressive to try to, again, go provide a service. It's more, hey, an agency is trying to pressure them into accepting,
Right.
That gets to be a
Just
problem.
like with Janet Acres, we had two people come to us and say, we want to connect to your sewer line.
it goes right by, right?
It goes
Yeah.
right by.
Right, 246.
We're not pursuing it.
Yeah.
But if someone comes to us and says, yes, we want to do it, or the community comes to us and says, yes, we want to do this, and let's pursue it.
Mhm.
I think we should,
Yeah.
but I don't think we want to aggressively go out
No.
there and say, we want to put a sewer line down your street.
I just think also about the, promoting it and communicating is if you
Right.
have another government agency, again, maybe multiple agencies that are already pressuring these special problems areas into adopting something that kind of, not only does it provide more but I think the seriousness is, again, it's not us, This is a citywide, a statewide agency that's like, look, we're gonna help you promote this because,
Right.
because it's in the foreseeable future. It's just an idea on the top of my head. I know this conversation doesn't need to continue,
No,
but
that's good.
Well, and the Jan Acres actually had to drill a new well because their past well was had too high of nitrates.
Yeah.
So they actually had to drill a new well for the residents in there. And then the county of Santa Barbara back in, I do believe, 2014 passed the Santa Barbara County local area management plan. And that document itself regulates if there's sewer within 200 feet of your property, you have to connect to sewer if it's available.
Right. So the ones that are back up to
Mhm.
154, if their septic system fails,
They're
they're
forced
forced to.
If available is keywords there.
Right.
And when Wendy told me about that Jan Acres and some outside users, if that didn't happen, I said that's a good thing. It didn't happen. I think you much more want to be, and I think I've already heard the board, and it's like what Mr. Prater said. You want to help facilitate, but we don't want to come into Jan Acres and said, we're the local government here to help you. We're here and we're here to help.
Right.
Because it just, so if you get a couple that get on our server, it's much better to say, look, Jan Acres, and they are identified in that local area management plan. And I used to work for the Regional Water Quality Control Board. And so when I first got here, I said, I knew Los Olivos had been a problem area identified forever, back in the 70s, right? These go back. And so I reached out to some of my old colleagues and they said, yeah, I was looking for what we used to call the basin plan. They said, oh, that's all passe. Now it's all, we put it into these local area management plans, and the state comes in with their authority and really says to the county and then to the local agencies, get her done, and we can help provide you some homes.
Yeah.
But it really takes that type of approach, like Prater was saying. If we want to annex or activate pallets, they're going to say, great, how are you going to pay for it?
Yeah.
If we want to go study annexing Jan or putting Jan into our sphere of influence, I think that's kind of maybe an obvious move that our board could say, that looks like that should be thought about during this review, this municipal services review, because these people have been identified as special problems. There's a lot of documentation that I'm just starting to look at, but it's there, groundwater problems, etc. But it really then maybe that would be the first step, getting them into our sphere of influence.
If I may, the first step should be interface with Solvay.
Yeah.
And we had that meeting. Bob and I went to it, I think maybe in 2018, and we discussed it. And it's a whole nother can of worms.
And it's a whole nother can, I'm sure, because then it becomes capacity too, because Wendy had noted to me that we've talked to Solvang in the past about, hey, we could possibly be looking for some more, treatment capacity in the future if we end up, getting our annexations and people all start hooking up. And they said, yeah, well, they really weren't interested in providing us more treatment capacity.
Right.
So and if we took on Jan Acres, I'd have to say right now, we're sitting at about rough numbers around 50% of our capacity at the plant. We're at about 50%. Boy, we've got a lot of properties within our current services boundaries that aren't hooked up. To go and start adding a sphere of influence around Jan and Acres. We really need to be studying our capacity closer. There's quite a number of things you got to line up and take forward.
I want to bring it up, but it's not something that I think we want to pursue at this time. It's just if it comes to fruition, or if they come to us and say, will you consider it? That's when we would look at we should look at all of our.
See, it really came out from number 16, right? It's the topics. It's just, I think it's letting LAFCO know that we've discussed this, and these are topics that it would be interesting to see if they can provide input.
Right.
Just because at least we get an idea that we looked over it, they provided input to us.
Right.
So we're both aware that this has been a topic of conversation for many years, but we're not.
Eventually, we're going to have to go up Refugio or come across come through somewhere to provide for Skyline Park,
Deer Trail?
Deer Trail.
This is
And,
all west side?
yeah, all
Yeah.
west, the rest of the west side,
Right.
you know, and I know there are some lines going, there are 2 houses in Skyline Park that are already hooked up.
But if you take Jan and Acres on, then you're gonna get Quail Valley too.
Right.
In, yeah.
How are you gonna push up from Quail Valley?
Exactly, you're gonna have to have a conversation.
You're gonna have
That's
to
where I
have-
was going.
How, wait, Craig, how, from the bottom of Quail Valley up to 246, what would you say the height is, 100 feet?
At least 100 feet, yeah.
It's
Maybe
actually
120.
probably easier to come the other way if we came down Refugio, is go the other way.
But there's an area you're not gonna be able to do anything
There'd
in
have to
Quail
be a
Valley.
pump station.
That's just,
Yeah.
that's pretty tough.
Right,
Or Deer
So-
Trail
so,
is
but-
voting for, you know,
But-
spearheading this.
but Solvang's looked at that, you bet, and they know that's a problem area
Yeah.
anyways, and it's gonna be expensive. And so, of course, they'd love to dump that on us.
And these are other areas outside of our current sphere, right? And this is all, right, and I think, my sense is that this municipal services review in wastewater is going to bring all these questions. You know, it'll be interesting to see the draft, because Solvang, I don't, you know, who's looking to become the regional wastewater treatment plant? If Solvang's not looking at building capacity, then possibly they aren't, and who is, and.
But Quail Valley and all of that area, those are all over 5-acre lots.
But do we know right now, within our current sphere of, yeah.
Yeah, influence, yeah.
Influence, thank you. How many are connected and how many aren't? What percentage is
Okay,
connected?
so the last time I asked that question, I said, if everybody that was in our sphere of influence hooked up tomorrow, do we have enough capacity? And the last time I believe we were told, yes, we do.
But what is that number? I think we should know that. number.
We should know that.
We should know
We
that
should
number
have
and it
that.
should be posted somewhere where we can see it.
Right.
And I
Because-
don't know that Solvang would agree with that, because in 2015, they said they didn't have enough to take on Los Olivos. You know,
But I think that was with our current capacity.
And they are upgrading.
Yeah,
So,
So if they upgraded,
expanding.
they're gonna, over time, that's what our money is for. By them upgrading, they're expanding capacity, and we're 21% of whatever that number is. Is that not correct?
well, so prior to the upgrade, they derated their plant, I think to 900,000 gallons. Don't quote me on that number. But with the upgrade, it's back to the 1.5.
And they're upgrading continuously. Is that also a fact?
I wouldn't say continuously.
Well, they do have plans as the growth
They have,
exponentially gets
they
out there.
have the property to do it.
So if I hear you, they took a step down to go back to where they were before. So the net effect is we're just back at the 20%.
Correct.
Okay, so they went down to 900,000 back to one. We're not
So-
getting 20% of this new big
Yeah.
1.8 to, okay.
So at the time that we asked for additional capacity, they said no because they had derated their plant because of the way it was operating. Well, now that they've done the aeration basins, it's back to their original 1.5 million gallons per day.
Interesting.
but I agree
And
that's
with
a
the-
question we should know the answer to.
And there's approximately 1,200 and something connections within our,
Potential connections
and
within
are
our sphere of influence.
Yeah.
Within our-
are we still, are those numbers?
In our,
What I want to do is relook at those numbers and say, okay, with our capacity or what we
Anticipate.
anticipate, if everybody were to hook up tomorrow, do we need more capacity? Or are we fine where we are? And I believe we're fine where we are.
I don't think so. I don't think so because the state has passed laws allowing more grandmothers' quarters to be added. I don't think that what was good before is not going to be good tomorrow because of that increase right there.
Right.
I think.
That's why I say we need to look at it again.
We probably need to have a study done and see where the hell we sit at.
Right.
Yeah, the next one thing that we talked about is Wendy and I went through this questionnaire. It's one of the things on here say, is there any legislation or things that are impacting your district? I'm like, oh, no. And Wendy said, well, what about that, you call grandma, but
Right.
additional
ADUs.
dwelling units.
There's
ADUs and then there's junior ADUs.
ADUs,
Yeah.
They passed last 2 months ago in Sacramento, there's no single family dwelling projects anymore, which means you can build duplexes and triplexes on a 6,000 square foot quarter acre lot. That's the new law. And that accommodates low cost housing and more people there. So that's a potential, a real potential that applies to the whole state. So Solvang is holding the bag there, and I got to believe that they're sharp enough, especially with Mr. Acosta there, to see that and be on top of that. And again, as they're upgrading it, as I recall, by them upgrading it, it allowed them to take more volume of water because it came out cleaner with the new infrastructure that they're implementing, and therefore allowing more volume to be introduced into the system. Plus, they're going to big, or they have the potential for expansion on top of that. I don't think that we would have a problem. I don't know for sure, but I think they're on top of this as far as being able to accommodate the future, because they got some big plans in Solvang projects going in there. And Van der Linden, he was pretty savvy about staying on top of that stuff. So I got to believe they'll carry that on. And we'll be, like I say, we'll still have the 20 or 21% of that number going up. So that should accommodate our demand for water.
Quick question about, do they charge us? So I know they charge us for these improvements, right? Which would,
Pay 20%.
so for us, whatever, so they're just going to be able to, is that how it goes with this contract? So if they want to take the next step to take in more capacity, that they're going to then just therefore levy a charge on us and we accept it?
I think that's static 20%. Is that accurate?
And we just pay for that?
Yeah.
We trade 20% over $50,000 in capital improvement.
Okay. So
And under 50,000, it's based on our flow.
So
Yeah.
do we have any way of knowing their proposed improvements down the road, or do
We ask every year for their CIP, which is their capital improvement plan.
Right.
And they're currently
And how far?
evaluating what they're going to do. So once they finalize that, then they'll send it to us. And then we base our capital improvement plan based on what they're doing for the solving portion.
How far reaching is that every year that you ask? Does it go up 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? What?
They're 5-year CIPs typically, so they should have a 5-year 10-year capital
It's 10.
improvement plan.
Yeah.
Right. And then as far as, I know the plant's being upgraded and that we're on the hook for 20% of, but that's all still staying, as Wendy sound, they went down to 9, but anyway, that's holding us 300,000 gallons per day. It's 20% of the 1.5 million. I think if they decide they're going to make it a 3 million gallon per day plant, that's something that they haven't proposed to us, but if they did, then we carried our weight to hold on to 20% of that, we could. That's going to be a big ticket item.
At this point, the last council that maybe not the last council meeting, but a couple council meetings ago, they are saying their total upgrades at this point are going to cost 19 million, a little over $19 million.
That's an upgrade of the current 1.5 million gallon per day plant. That is not an expansion.
Right.
Okay.
But the upgrade
And
accommodates more volume by the state.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that that's accurate.
But by the time they do their studies and they actually get to doing the work with the rate of materials and labor and contracts,
It could be double that.
we could be looking at a lot more, as we know from doing
All right.
Horizon. And, you know, I mean, the one thing that I know we have said to them was, we would like to finance that along with you, or have you finance it and we pay you a payment on it instead of putting out of all of our capital cash. But they could say, hey, we need $3 million tomorrow to do this upgrade so that they keep their rating. Depending on their finance rating, they might need to catch some cash as like a down payment and for to get their rating,
You know,
finance rating.
if they go up in volume, we have to pay more for the upgrades to make that volume happen. Did we get a break when they were unable to keep the volume? I mean, we already paid for that amount.
No, because we still had our 300,000 gallons. They didn't take away
reduce it.
that
Oh, yeah.
allotment.
They just knew we were only using 50%, so it's probably.
So they're
And
borrowing.
Mike, what were you explaining to me maybe last week about how much capacity we own, and did we sell some of it?
Right, so the district owns 300,000 gallons, or 20% of that 1.5 million. At one point, when before the tribe built their own treatment plant, you all may recall, the tribe was wheeling through us, or we are taking tribe wastewater through our system and going to the San Ynez Solvang plant with that. And at that time, we went through a couple of agreements, 2 or 3 agreements, and it got up to the district selling to the tribe 88,000 gallons of our capacity. Checked on that last week. As far as we know, that looks like that's still in place. The tribe is not using that because they built their own plant. Of course, we're operating that plant as something different, but they're not using that 88,000. I actually talked with district council about that, because I said, what is the status of that? You know, if they came to us tomorrow and said, we need to flow 88,000 gallons, would we have to let them? And I think the answer is yes, but we need to find out, because back to these questions that are coming up, really, and in your answers here, it does talk about what our current average flow is on the year. And it's getting near 150,000 gallons, okay, about half of our reserve capacity. But if you take off of that 300,000, the 88,000, well, then we're beyond 50%, you know, and we really got to start looking at that. And especially in light of, you know, it can't happen. Well, you know, tomorrow, not all these properties can come hook up, but it comes over time. But if something catastrophic happened and all of a sudden everyone was coming and saying, we need to get that sewer going, and we started ramping up our connections and everything, we could be facing a capacity issue real quick. And there's capacity in transmission lines. And ultimately, though, it's that treatment capacity. And so we have some questions to answer there.
Is council looking into this contract?
The city council?
Yeah, no, our council, Rick. Was he looking into this contract with the tribe?
Oh, with the tribe, yeah. He and I spoke Friday, and so last Friday. We haven't spoken again since. He says every time this comes up, I got to get all those out and look at that. But I think that if we decided, yeah, contractually the tribe still owns that, and as well as a district, we probably need to go be looking for additional treatment capacity. I would say the first and lowest piece of fruit hanging is that 88,000 gallons we sold to the tribe, to go back to them and say we need to.
We don't know if we sold it to them.
Give it to us.
I wouldn't expect them to give it to us.
They
We
won't
sold
sell
it
it
to
to
them
us
for
either.
1.4.
And the reason
million.
is that property that has a building permit on it is going to be built, and that effluent is going to need to be treated and taken out. How are they going to move it?
Across 246 into the tribe treatment and collect.
They have their own place now.
That's what I mean. I
So we
don't.
could actually, that's a bonus for us.
I don't know what the tribe's answer would be, and I wouldn't want to presume it to be, go pack sand. I would assume, and again, we did sell it to them. $1.4 million was the sale price for the last 40,000 or 48,000 gallons per day of that capacity.
There's no sunset clauses. We sold it into perpetuity. We sold it to.
That's
them.
correct. That's like, who is connected to our sewer? You're connected in
Bad
perpetuity.
legal decision.
Well, I was gonna say, but
Yeah.
it's just confusing that we wouldn't know that we sold this in all future, right? Future.
Yeah.
It was not sunset. It's not a 5-10 year
No.
clause.
No, you don't, not services like wastewater.
No, I
service.
get that, but if that sounds either that, yeah, I don't know. I wasn't around, but if we had any inkling that they were gonna build their own, service.
The truth of the matter is that the Indians kept the community services district alive for years. We would have been bankrupt
Okay.
if it wasn't for their overflow charges that Northwestern was charging them. It kept the district afloat.
Okay.
Anyways, that's how they did it. He got way over on the West Side project, spent way too much money, came in much higher. And to make those payments, the Indians paid for it all,
Wow.
or kept it afloat until each time it floated itself.
Sweet. Probably
I think-
definitely brought Paul a little bit here.
I was
Sorry,
just going to
Karen.
say that this discussion, it just really drives home the point, how important it is to have a really strong general manager who understands, and because we've got a lot of sorting out to do, there's a lot of things coming at us development wise. And so I think it's good that we're doing this MSR right now and having these discussions, because things that are a problem will continue to be a problem.
Can I, Director Jones, I don't know if this is the time for it because there's more of a presentation for LAFCO, but are we in a position to discuss as a board, any of the future latent powers that we are interested in taking on and trying to develop a short list of the desires of other board directors or members of the public? I know it's something we've kind of batted around, but I don't know if now's the time or we discuss it. Can we put it on the agenda for the next meeting in April?
I think it's kind of broadly covered on this agenda, but I would like to have a specific discussion. Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. I think this topic, I think there's a couple of things we can do. I'd like to we're going to send back a partially completed questionnaire to LAFCO. So we can get them all this mundane stuff on here that we have, and then say we're working on it. And I think in regards to the boundaries and the other specific questions and that I pointed out in other that are policy related, and this latent powers question, I think, right, we come back to our next regular board meeting and say, let's you guys all have these questions in front of you now on boundaries and what, let's have a discussion around that. I can list out all of our latent powers, what they are, and we can have a discussion on latent powers and how they might be activated. Like I said, the first thing when you want to activate a latent power, LAFCO is going to say, great, now how are you going to pay for that? Show us an estimate for what, just like you outlined. And so there's work.
Maybe we should just hit boundaries
This time and
next time and then hit the other ones another time, because I'm just thinking of the
Yeah.
length of the meetings
Yep.
and,
Yeah.
should just, let's
And-
focus and get the questions answered and then focus again and get the questions answered. And I don't care what order it is, it's just,
Yeah, I'm just under, the belief that not that we have to get into a lengthy discussion, but maybe at least the next board meeting, we can just speak
Yeah.
about the different power. We don't need to go into what are we really going to move forward with, but maybe we look at just a short list that we're interested in.
Right.
Because we talked about it a couple meetings before, just simply, we know that there's issues for our constituents and we have to address it. And we should address it, I think. Again, not every
Well,
couple.
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt, Director Van Pelt. I am thinking, even if the discussion is no more than setting up an ad hoc committee of 2 interested board members to knock around the ideas and come back to the board with what they think is reasonable or what we may want to pursue. And then that way the board doesn't have to spend a lot of time going over recreation and sidewalks and whatever.
good.
So if we
I
have
think-
it on the agenda, we could at least talk about appointing an ad hoc committee.
Yeah, let's put it on the agenda then.
Yeah, that's what this direction staff's hearing is that, for our next regular meeting agenda, we'll bring forward this MSR sphere of influence review item, and we'll attempt to specifically get after these boundary questions, but I'll also provide some introductory information on what the latent powers are all about. And then at that meeting, we can talk about that in general, and then maybe get that ad hoc, and then with the idea of getting going on latent power investigations and further discussion.
Yeah, and I'll finish with this from my standpoint. Is I think we have to accelerate it. Just I know we've all said it in this room. Is around us is a lot of change,
Yeah.
and some of the change we unfortunately find out later than we should be. So we're not always informed of the powers around us that are dictating to us what we can and can't do. So to me, it would do a great service to our constituents and ourselves to accelerate these discussions on latent powers, just so that we can push forward the voice of our constituents and such. So yeah, I'm definitely gonna push for us to move quickly. Yeah.
Good.
I like it. Is there anything else? Jay, yes.
I've got a few notes of things and clarifications I think would be useful. One thing I've noticed during this conversation is sometimes there's like a mixing off between your boundary and your sphere of influence. And I just want to point out again, it's like if you annex territory, then it becomes part of your current district boundary. But the sphere of influence is separate from this. You don't annex things into the sphere of influence. Your current sphere of influence seems to be relatively the same as your boundary, except it goes further south.
Right.
And I was curious when you were talking about if everyone were to be connected, that you really meant the full sphere of influence, not just if everyone in your service area were connected.
Even our services boundary
Yeah.
right now with that west side annexation that we took on quite recently,
Yeah.
very few connections.
He's referring to, our sphere of influence comes down and comes through here. These parcels, anything south of 246 is not annexed. It's, They're in our
Bolton
sphere.
Inn is outside service?
no, if you look at these, so this green dotted line right here, that's all annexed properties.
Right. So some of it is annexed in south of
Yes,
246.
so
Very
this is annexed, all this right here is all annexed, but all of this is not annexed.
But that's in our boundary.
It's in our boundary.
sphere.
But
Yeah.
it's in your sphere of
In our-
influence,
It's our
it's
sphere.
not
In our sphere,
Okay.
yes,
But it's a very minor area, really, overall.
yes.
Okay, and so really in looking at our current capacity and relative to what it can serve in our current services boundary, there is that great area out on the west side. And then even in our more historic services boundary, there are areas
Yeah,
that
and
there are connections are hit and miss.
Yeah,
They're few.
Samantha, Calzada, well, maybe not Calzada,
Right, the red dots.
Deer
That's
Trail,
country-
Tiana, Country Road.
Country Road, Country Lane. Those aren't connected by, like,
Right.
this area right here, none of these
Have we
parcels are
updated
connected.
that map with Verizon on there? The lines on Verizon?
We have the new maps in there. This is an old map. We didn't replace.
Most
this
current
one.
maps in the log
Yeah.
that we keep
Yeah.
updated, and of course on
Yeah.
GIS.
Okay, so they are updated. We got the maps that we.
We can't
Ongoing.
just draw onto this one what we need.
Yeah, you
Sharp-
could.
It's a lot easier
Yeah.
than building.
You could use a wipe off marker.
Right.
So what was your,
No, I was just saying, so they're updated, so I can go look at the maps
Yes.
inside there. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I look at this one, I always get confused.
Yeah, that one in the lobby, and I've been trying,
Yeah.
but, good.
So
Jay.
the other thing I want to talk about is that the different services for different districts that are providing you can be like a piece of property, let's put it that way. A piece of property can be in the sphere of influence of Solvang and be in the sphere of influence of a special district for different kinds of services. And now it is the case that Solvang, as part of their city my understanding, I might be wrong, does sewer services. Is that
Correct.
Yeah. And so there is some confusion with relation to what it would mean for a piece of property, like from a LAFCO perspective, to maybe be in the sphere of influence of the St. Anthony Service District, even though we might expect that it would eventually become part of that city. But that issue has come up before, I believe, with around Longbow. And so there's this issue of like, it's not, from my understanding, particularly strange for LAFCO to decide and be very effective for the St. Anthony Service District to provide sewer service to an area, even though we expect the police services and random park service, something to happen from from a nearby city. And that then connects to an idea of my understanding, which also, again, I'm trying to provide my understanding of things, which I'm sadly I'm not the reference book here. But my understanding is that tribal land can be placed into a special district, but they would be, and that would allow them to vote on the special district, but they would not be taxed by the district. And so it's like confusing when that would happen. So like, this is an example of what we see this with the military bases, the university, things like that. They are located within both the county and the districts, but they end up being tax exempt. And this is because all of the people who are in the United States get to vote on national politics. And it's like the tribe gets to vote on the county politics and on local politics for things that affect them. But it is weird that if they would be put into a place where they would be voting on something but not be taxed for it. But that's not as bad, right, as being in a place where you're taxed for something and not getting to vote on it. So it's possible that you might end up with something like an area of the tribe, like that could be within a district. I don't know if LAFCO would do that, but I'm just saying, like, as far as I know, that's at least theoretically possible. And then and this continues to tie into thoughts, I think, like related thoughts. So we mentioned your question earlier about park districts in the county. In Isla Vista, we actually have that exact scenario happen, where the county does parks for all the incorporated areas, and we have a parks district. And in fact, the county owns parks within the boundaries of our parks district. And the parks that are owned by the county within our parks district are managed by the county. And the parks that are owned by our parks district within our parks district are managed by the parks district. And they have to coordinate with each other anytime they want to do something. There's actually like there's one plot of land where there's literally a slice down the middle, and half of it is owned by the county and half of it is owned by the parks district. And anytime they want to do something in the area, you can kind of coordinate with both entities. And this is another case where it's like what it really means for conflicts to occur can be somewhat case specific. So in this instance, it's parks districts really operate, while they might be, they're providing service to an area that gets to vote on the work that they do on the parks. And they're providing service to an area that therefore should be taxed on the work that is done on those parks because that area is benefiting from it. They only own some parks. And so they're really only actually doing things within the boundaries of the parks that they own. And so you can have two overlapping districts that are both providing parks powers to an area that just happen to own separate parks. And so you can like turn on a parks power for your district, but the question would be, what parks do you have? And it would not be the case that if you were to do that, you would just get the parks from the county. The county would have to sell the parks, decide that they wanted to grant the parks, and I can't imagine they would ever do that. You would have to be some kind of MOU for you to provide services to through those parks that the county was willing to temporarily lend you service to them. But it should be possible for you to activate parks power there, or those things separately to activate, to end up with a sphere of influence, either a boundary that I think connects through a tribe, or to have a sorry, I was saying not to the tribe. Have a sphere of influence or a boundary for sewer power that would actually be an area that was in the city, or potentially to have some people who are in the tribe sort of in your district, but really they're just able to vote. They're not being taxed, and they're not being like there's no requirements on them, but they get the benefit of being able to vote on things. There's a lot of complexity with relation to what boundaries and spheres and overlapping means. But I hope I provided some clarity as opposed to maybe more confusing.
Thank you, Jay.
No, you did. Thank you.
No, that's helpful.
very
The
helpful.
county owns the airport, but a separate nonprofit runs the airport.
Hmm.
To your point, you can have county-owned property managed by the citizens, in this case, the airport authority. Go ahead. I didn't mean, I think I cut somebody off.
Nope,
No.
you didn't, Karen.
Okay, so how are we, Mike? Do you have good direction from the board on what to do with the questions yet to be answered?
I think so. We'll be bringing those back, and I hope everyone, spend some time thinking about it so we can have a good discussion around those boundaries. We can get some answers. Maybe some of our answers are going to be placeholders. Yeah, we're thinking about it, we're working on it, whatever. We'll get back to you. But we'll have those discussions. And then, like I say, I will bring information on latent powers, but I think we'll take a step at a time. Yeah, Frank.
Do we have any pending meetings with the Indians so that we do know what they have planned for their construction and building out? I think it might be a good idea for all of us or some of us to meet with them, just so that
I agree.
so that
I
we
think-
have some type of idea, and maybe we should be meeting with them once a year or once every 6 months.
Yeah, we might want to have a standing committee. We have the wastewater committee, and we no longer meet with Solvang. Our wastewater committees used to meet together. We could have a wastewater committee. I don't know what their government rules and legalities, how that would go, but it seems like it would be a really productive thing.
Yeah, if we want to do a feasibility study and a long-term study, a long-term plan study, we need to know what their plans are so that we can do our plan. So I'd be happy to be on that committee, or
We can talk about a committee. We can put that on the agenda. And it also brings up the situation where I read in the paper that we're going to get our wastewater treated at their plant, and that taxpayer dollars of, in the 6 figures went from Salud Carbajal to the tribe for that. And so if we had some kind of relationship other than just the employees who work at the plant, if, be it the GM or a committee from the board, that could be helpful. But it's something we would have to talk about and agendize.
Well, they're quickly getting bigger than the town, so.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Right, and so I could consider a committee for interface with the tribe. I think it's would be a very good idea to have an executive committee, be the GM and maybe an ad hoc, and council can help us with that next month. We'll have that on the agenda to discuss, not just from their growth plans, but right now, this is 20% of the district's budget each year. And Wendy and I are talking about today as I'm trying to wrap my head around the budget and just understand all that. If the tribe said, they could come to us tomorrow and say, thanks, we're good, we got it from here, and we're gonna have some changes here at the district, staffing wise or whatnot. We'd have to be prepared. So we'd want to know that was coming before they knocked on the door and said we're done. And as well, what are their plans with growth and how do they see that? I did see Mr. Cohen, Sam Cohen, he represents the tribe, I don't know, and he presented himself here at the office after our last regular meeting when we accepted the streetlights. And he was coming to say, he was on that meeting with your board that night and made comment. He came the next day just to say thanks and express to staff, thanks for getting that done. Then he wanted some of my time, and he talked about the fact that what Karen had read about in the paper, that they received a grant. As he outlined it to me, he said for them to look at expanding their reclamation plant, which is their wastewater plant, the reclamation plant. And he said 100,000 or whatever the number was. He said at one time we had thought that we'd include in those plans getting wastewater from San Ynez. And he said, but boy, we kind of heard back on that. He goes, he asked me, do you think there's any possibility? And I said, I would go forward with your plan that you're not getting wastewater from us. We're here to treat your wastewater, operate your contract. We enjoy doing it, whatever, and we want to coordinate with you on any of your plans from that perspective. But from the thought of the district collecting its wastewater and sending it to the nation for treatment, I said, I'm not hearing any, interest in that at all at this point. So I think he heard that loud and clear, but regardless, they've got a grant funded plan that they're moving forward with. And like I told them, we would certainly will be interested in hearing what that's about, because from the perspective of operating that wastewater collection and treatment system, yes. And as a neighbor, yes.
Do you have any insight into how people, nations, communities, service districts go about getting a grant like they received? Is there anyone in this room that's
And why we didn't get one?
Well, I mean, we probably didn't apply for it, but I'm just wondering, is it something that's out there that we simply aren't aware of? We do this in my line of work in infrastructure for electric vehicles, right? There's all kinds of grants all over, but it's really figuring out where the grants are, right? Who holds the power?
That's just like the prosperity grant that was brought to this board before for us to support, that Solvang has applied for and are probably going to get $2 million for their treatment plant, which will give us a direct savings.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering
Right,
if
and
there's grants.
Solvang applies for the grant, but I can tell you an advantage, and we can apply for grants. But I can tell you an advantage that the tribe has is for some grants, they are still considered a disadvantaged community, even though they're a wealthy casino, they get disadvantaged community funds because
and actually,
So are we.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
we are considered a disadvantaged community. When my wife went to Washington, DC and looked at these prosperity grants, as the chamber director for Solvang and for this community, we are deemed a disadvantaged community. So there are grants out there for us.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess the point is
just
maybe
need
on
to
the
know which
futures-
ones to apply for.
Yes.
And what to look for.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of grants, and I say this not to extend the meeting, but when we talk about the cost of servicing new customers, it always comes down to, well, the cost, right? The cost, and who's going to pay for it? Well, it seems to me that there could be grants out there that can lower the cost of servicing more, which would actually lower the cost of everyone, right? All of our constituents. So it just seems like there's a lot of routes for us to do potentially a better job, and part of it is just finding the money in the grants and applying for them as a disadvantaged community. Yeah.
Well,
Matter of
and-
fact, there's
We are-
a consultant firm who does nothing but find money for specific agencies, businesses, sewer, water, solar. You can hire them and they'll do all the legwork and tell you, hey, you guys qualify for this, and it's all federal money. And sometimes it's state money. So maybe that'll take the logistics out of our hands, give it to somebody else, they'll take a cut of the action. Hey, that's money we didn't have before.
Yeah, because this could fund other services too. So I guess to extend it, it's not just about wastewater, it's about other latent powers that we could be looking into, is how to fund it. Anyhow, I think maybe we can take this up at our next meeting, right? But I think Director DeAmber is going to give us a loan for this consulting service.
And you know what I say to you?
Yeah, give me that thing.
What's in your wallet?
Well, is there anything else, or should we adjourn?
I have a comment to touch on your grant thing. There are grants that are being offered by the state currently for disadvantaged communities to put in sewer pipe infrastructure, but you have to have a plan on where you're going to go and how much pipe and stuff you're going to do. I have a folder on all of it right now.
Is there a limit on how much, or is it funded by the size?
There are lists of agencies that do nothing but go out and find grants for you.
Yeah.
There's grants and lowest interest loans. And often, and maybe through this process, as we start looking at regional sewer plans and whatnot, I know when I was involved in Napomo, we got into some water grants that were led by the county. But I don't want to cut off the conversation, but maybe I do a little. I mean, as far as going down and saying, what can we do in the way of grants? Yeah, and then there's no such thing as a free lunch either. I mean, I can tell you a story about a $2 million grant that really
$4
wasn't
million.
worth it.
Yeah,
At
yeah.
the end
I
of
got a
it.
couple of those stories too.
Yeah.
But the short answer is yes, but we really gotta,
Yeah, but just good topic, right? I mean, it's, I think the LAFCO presentation spurred us to
Yes.
think about, what we have to look forward to in the future, because times are changing and they're right in front of us. So
Yeah.
we either take the power or someone else will take it.
Okay, well, with that is, would somebody like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting at 7:23?
I'll make that motion.
Got a motion? Do we have a second?
I'll second it. Via Director Redfern.
Here we
Wendy?
have adjourn the meeting at 7:23 by Director Beard and a second by Director Van Pelt. We'll do a roll call vote. Director Redfern,
I,
Director Van Pelt,
Aye.
Director Deambra,
Yes.
Director Beard,
Yes.
Director Jones.
Yes. I was just checking. It looks like somebody tried to ask a question and I didn't. I don't know. Oops, Zoom. Okay, well, with that, we are adjourned. And thank you all. I'll see you next week or a couple days after. I'll be at the next meeting. Hooray.
On there.
I will get them
Bye-bye.
streaming by the time I see you.
okay, good.
Thank you.
And thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Wendy. Thanks, Mike.
I.
Rick Bob.
Night, guys.